Agenda. Let's bring in our political strategists, Bruce Hawker and Grahame Morris. I want to start on the carbon tax. Grahame, it'll go through the lower house this week. The big question, will it go through the new Senate? Are you confident?
Well, the new Senate, I don't know about confident, but look, if the Palmer people just do the orthodox, it should go through. If they want to get tricky, they'll end up like other independents and have very short lifestyles. And it just seems to me that you know, they ought to, on this one at least, vote as a bloc. I'm told I'm going to be sharing or adjacent offices with Clive Palmer's people at the National Press Club, and
yes.
And we'll see. You know, I don't know whether, you know, some sort of little poodles are going to turn up or a blue heeler, but it will depend on the sort of casserole that I give them when they come into the neighbourhood.
Yes, we should point out they've leased some office space there because they didn't get party room status for a room up here in Parliament House, so they've gone down the road.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll be able to pass notes under the door, Grahame.
But look, if they do the orthodox, and I think it's what most people expect, it's what their supporters expect, and many of them are conservative people, if they muck this up and the people are stuck with a blinking carbon tax, they could have very short-lived lives.
Bruce, how do you see this going? What's your expectation? I know, Clive Palmer has been making various demands and certainly putting pressure on the government over various things, but at the end of the day, what do you reckon he'll do on this one?
Well, I think he will probably ultimately support the abolition of the carbon tax because it's an unpopular measure, and nobody, least of all Clive Palmer, wants to be associated with an unpopular measure if he can avoid it. So I think there are going to be 8 new senators.
What about Bill Shorten? He's standing by it.
Well, I think he's going to vote for an emissions trading scheme or a price on carbon, and I think that's a very sensible thing to do. And by the way, that's what Labor went to the last election on, and it's what Labor went to the election before and the election before that on as well, as did the Liberal government in 2007. So I think that will be the outcome. There are 8 of these people sitting on the crossbenches. I think the government needs 6 of them. I think that gives them a fair bit of room to manoeuvre and to work out some sort of a deal which will get the abolition of the carbon tax through.
Yeah, one element of it is that $10 billion fund, this Clean Energy Finance Corporation. From what the Minister was saying earlier, Greg Hunt, that will be something they debate through the Senate. I know there are, like Ricky Muir, John Madigan, who actually don't mind this, or at least are open to keeping this $10 billion fund because it's making money at the end of the day, and it does have some similarities to what the government's talking about with direct action. So that may be something, Grahame, in the end they'll have to keep.
Well, maybe there are 6 or 7 pieces of legislation tied up with this whole carbon tax thing. But at the moment, the government wants the whole blinking thing gone. And you did ask about the Labor Party, and I've thought about this. And I thought, you know, the last election was devastating for them, and a lot of it the carbon tax.
On this issue, yeah.
The one before that wasn't much better. And you look at all the leaders, the back end of John Howard.
Assembly election.
Hey?
That was the Citizens' Assembly idea that Julie Gillard took to that
But you
election.
have a look at how difficult this whole carbon tax thing has been. And gee, if I were a Labor Party member, marginal seat member at the moment, I'd be wondering if I should be sick when the vote is taken. Because you know damn well, the Liberal Party is going to run commercials and say, did you really vote for the carbon tax? And most people say, no, I didn't like the thing. They say, well, you did. Your local member did. And just imagine how much it will cost you if the carbon tax is reintroduced by a Labor Party government.
Bruce,
it's dangerous.
Yeah, that it's not a bad point. What do you think Labor should do after this vote, should it go through and the carbon tax is repealed? It is a mystery, isn't it, exactly what they then take to the next election?
Well, of course, Mark Butler has made it clear that they're going to look and see what the debate's like in 2 years' time or a year's time before they make a final decision. I would expect, though, that they will come up with an emissions trading scheme of some description, a cap and trade, whatever you want to call it, because ultimately, if you want to do anything about climate change, you really do have to put a price on carbon and make it unattractive for businesses and industry to be belching that out into the atmosphere. That's the hard reality.
It'll be a tough sell, though. It'll be a tough sell, though, for Labor.
But having said that, latest polling around the issue suggests that the public is, for want of a better word, warming to the idea of taking on climate change seriously. I think under Rudd and certainly to some extent under Gillard, we were sort of ahead of the game to a large extent. I don't think that's the case now. I think Australia generally is lagging in the debate on climate. And so I think Labor will come to will come up with a policy that supports a price on carbon, and that will be one of the things that they will take to the election.
And Grahame, Labor's got a pretty good comeback now when the government says, the carbon tax is costing families $550. If we saw Bill Shorten today again and again and again point out families, single income, 2 kids earning 65 grand, this budget is going to cost them $6,000.
Well, that's because of those blinking morons who used to be in government who left us with this big debt. What would Bill Shorten be doing now if he were in government? Would he be just saying, look, the debt doesn't matter, deficit doesn't matter, let's just spend. I reckon that they too would have had to have cut. And, we will see in a couple of years' time whether or not this economic whack has worked so that the economy is back in shape. But by geez, the alternate was dreadful. And that is why the government had to take some of these awful decisions. And they are politically really hard.
But David, that would be fine were it not for the paid parental leave scheme. $22 billion over 4 years that they're going to spend to support women who, at the top end, are earning more than $100,000 to stay at home for full-time pay for 6 months. I think that's the problem that the government's got here. They can't say that they had to make all these tough decisions and that there was a budget emergency and then turn around and splurge $22 billion on a paid parental leave scheme that's unnecessary. That's where it just looks like hypocrisy.
Let's move it on. This Labor leadership issue, the suggestion that Anthony Albanese, since the contest, has been undermining Bill Shorten. Bruce, do you see any of that?
This story by Troy Bramston has the decided odour of codswallop about it, I've got to say. When the leadership speculation was on, and there was certainly a move against Julia Gillard in 2012, 2013, I spoke to plenty of members of Parliament who were very unhappy. I never once spoke to Anthony Albanese. And nor would I presume to, because I know that he was always a very loyal minister who understood that we had real problems but was not going to say or do anything that was going to undermine his leader.
Works, because he was in the Rudd camp but in the Gillard inner circle. So from your perspective, someone who was fairly actively involved in getting the numbers for Kevin Rudd, there was no discussion with Anthony Albanese?
I never spoke to him once about any of these issues. Now, I'm not saying that he didn't have his own views about it, but he kept them very much to himself. And I think that's the very important thing that you've got to consider here. This is not in the nature of Anthony Albanese to be doing the sorts of things that they're saying that he's doing here. People might have a whinge every now and then, but that's a far cry from saying you're doing anything to undermine the leader. In fact, under the rules that Kevin Rudd introduced, with the active support and encouragement of Anthony Albanese, you need 60% of the caucus to remove the leader anyway. So why would you be even thinking about going around doing that? It's just nonsense, and the sooner it's put to bed, the better, I think.
Well, yeah, I guess the suggestion is sour grapes over what happened with that leadership ballot. But Grahame, I've got to say, I've not witnessed any undermining from Anthony Albanese. What do you make of this?
Having worked for a hell of a lot of political leaders, this wouldn't be the first leadership story that's based on bovine droppings. Look, I know Anthony Albanese. There may come a time where he might move against the leader, but not now. But a bit of gratuitous advice for him. I think he does have to be careful in that if, for some unknown reason, the party decides that Bill Shorten is not really competitive at the next election, then I think Albanese's got to be slightly careful as to where Tanya Plibersek is positioning herself. And it may well be that, if things keep going the way they are, that Tanya Plibersek just goes straight over the top of Anthony Albanese in any sort of future leadership battle. So that'd be the one I'd be worried about him not to, we all know Anthony, and you take him at his word as he did. He was pretty strong in the Parliament today.
Look, we've only got a minute left. I just want to ask you both quickly about intelligence powers. We all remember 9/11, and on the back of that, much tougher powers were brought in. Now the concerns about Aussies involved with this group in Iraq. The government is considering what further measures. Do you think that would be appropriate, or would it be a difficult thing for the government?
Look, I'm not sure yet, but I think the first thing is to make sure that all the arms of government are talking to each other about this, and that we don't have some little groups there saying, haha, I had some information I didn't tell you, and then all of a sudden we've got an accident involving Australians who should not be in this sort of firing line in this dreadful place.
Bruce, would there be an appetite, do you think, for tougher powers?
I suspect so. And that doesn't mean to say that they're not doing a lot of things already and haven't been for a long time. But like this crowd, they are truly very scary, and to have them coming back into the country without really close surveillance worries the heck out of me.
Bruce Hawker, Grahame Morris, no doubt we'll talk about this issue more in the coming weeks and months, because it's not going away. Sadly, we're out of time. Thanks for joining us.